Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez denounced the U.S. non-inclusive approach to the upcoming 9th Summit of the Americas. At the same time, he informed of the causes and consequences of the problems encountered by the electric power system since 1 week ago. Russian Defense Ministry authorities announced that the port of the city of Mauripol restarted its activities. Senegal's President Macky Sall said on Wednesday that 11 newborn babies died in a fire at the neonatal section of a regional hospital in the town of Tibaoune, around 120 kilometers east of the capital Dakar. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We are beginning with the news. Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez denounced the U.S. non-inclusive approach to the upcoming 9th Summit of the Americas.
We all know that the United States government conceived from the beginning this Summit of the Americas in a non-inclusive manner, which means from the original design by the U.S. government, from its initial intention, it was planned that this summit would not be inclusive, and it was their intention to exclude several countries, among them Cuba, despite the strong regional demand to put an end to exclusions in this type of events. It is also known that the U.S. government was making intense efforts and has applied brutal pressures to demobilize the just and firm demands of the majority of the countries in the region that the summit should be inclusive.
President Diaz-Canel said that the instability in the national electricity system is related to breakage and necessary maintenance to the thermoelectrical plants had to be subjected and fuel deficit. Those causes are linked to the tightening of the blockade by the U.S.
We're going through a complex situation that fundamentally affects our population, that provokes discomfort in our population, and that also stops an important part of our economic activity. That these things happen, that our economy is affected, that our population is affected, shows how perverse the blockade policy is, and also shows how double-standard the policy of the United States government is. Because they said that they will do everything possible so that the Cuban people have better possibilities of life.
The Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, arrived in Cuba on Wednesday for an official visit. According to the Foreign Ministry, Prime Minister Gonsalves will hold talks with Cuban authorities as part of his work agenda in the Caribbean country until next Sunday. This visit takes place prior to the 21st Summit of Heads of State and Government of Al-BTCP, which will be held in Havana next Friday, May 27th. The leader of Ecuador's indigenous movement, CONAI, accused President Guillermo Lazo's policies of forcing Ecuadorians to be wage laborers in the mines. The indigenous leader said that mining projects in Ecuador should be suspended and investments redirected to agriculture. The 39-year-old leader is one of the main opposition figures to Lazo's government. Lazo and Issa met twice last year, but no agreements were reached, and CONAI announced an indefinite mobilization starting June 13. The Secretary for International Affairs of the Evita movement, Alejandro Rusconi, accused in Argentina the Colombian immigration authorities for not authorizing him aboard the flight that would take him from Buenos Aires to Bogota to participate as an observer in the Colombian electoral process on May 29th.
Having complied with all the necessary formalities and requirements, I showed up at the Ezeiza airport in the early hours of today. When I tried to board the Avianca flight bound for Bogota, I was informed that due to an email sent by the Colombian immigration authorities, it was suggested that I should not be allowed on board that flight. In view of this situation, it is important to make it clear that there's no impediment that justifies the denial of my entry to that country and that prevents me from performing the task for which I was summoned.
The government of Ivan Duque has not been able to stop the violence against different social factions in Colombia. During his mandate, many parts of the territory have been left in the hands of armed groups that manage to expand and worsen the conflicts, in detriment of the most vulnerable communities. Our correspondent Hernan Tobar gives us the details.
Guillermo, an indigenous and peasant leader, is tied by his ancestral customs to these lands he is far away from for more than 2 years. Continuous death threats, persecution, and stigmatization has forced him to become a nomad. He says he left his Sierra Nevada in Santa Marta temporarily, but that he will go back soon.
I have to leave my land because all the death threats against my life, and due to the claims that we made on human rights violations, the persecution of social leaders, and because of all the demands we have made for land restitution and the opposition to large-scale mining in TeleSUR.
The Sierra Nevada is geographically shared by 3 departments. One of them is Cesar. According to the We Are Defenders NGO, in the first quarter of 2022, 3 human rights defenders have been assassinated, making it one of the more risky departments for such leaders.
There are several elements that make it risky for us to remain here, like illegal armed groups that we believe are the successor of paramilitary gangs. We also suffer persecution from institutions, military intelligence, and political clans in power, to whom we have been denouncing acts of corruption, and the complicity of paramilitary groups in a violent retaking of territories.
Complicidad con esos grupos paramilitares que están ejerciendo una retoma violenta del territorio.
Guillermo represents one of those lives of struggle and resistance that have not yet been silenced. However, others are no longer among their communities. They made him disappear during the 4th year of President Duque. According to the Institute of Studies for Development and Peace in the past, more than 900 leaders have been assassinated.
There is a dispute over ethnic territories. 50% of Colombian territory is collectively owned by ethnic groups and overlaps with forest reserves area, like the Amazon, the Pacific, and the high parts of the Andean mountain ranges, where the biggest disputes occur, and of course around land interests where there are macro projects, either water or infrastructure.
In the 4 years of Ivan Duque's term in office, the presence of armed actors has increased in several departments, either by violent action or by complicity with members of the military forces. 420 municipalities in the country are influenced by armed groups, which represents 37% of the territory, a situation that generates disputes for control of the territory due to illegal income, drug trafficking, and both legal and illegal mining, a situation that affects vulnerable populations.
As the first perpetrator identified as victimizing social leader is the Wolf clan, followed by the so-called dissidents of the FARC and the ELN. In some cases, we have identified that the alleged perpetrators are members of the security forces in a few smaller cases. But it is very worrying that the security forces appear as the alleged perpetrators of this violence.
The terror generated by the struggles of these armed groups is also reflected in human rights violations, such as displacement. So far, only in 2022, according to the United Nations, this situation has left more than 78,000 victims. In 2021, displacements reached 73,000. In 2020, it was 35,000, and in 2019, it was 33,000. These figures were never recognized by the current government.
Hernán Darío Tobar, TeleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
We're taking a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador expressed his condolences and pain and solidarity with the relative of the victims of the mass shooting in the United States elementary school, which left 19 students dead and 2 teachers dead on Monday.
It hurts a lot that there are these misfortunes, and we send a hug to the families of the young people, of the victims, and also our solidarity with the United States government, because these are very sad, very difficult times.
In the United States, the debate on the use and regulation of guns is reopened after the recent massacre at an elementary school in Texas, which left over 20 dead, 19 of them children. The Democratic and Republican parties in the Congress commented on the fact, highlighting their differences on gun control, which prevented further regulation. In general, proposals to review gun control laws such as a ban on assault weapons or high-capacity magazines face major difficulties at the federal level due to the refusal of the Republican Party and some conservative sectors of the Democratic Party. The U.S. government will establish a police law reform 2 years after the murder of black citizen George Floyd. This provision would establish a national database of officers terminated for misconduct. It would also require federal agencies to update their use of force policies. The announcement follows the second anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, who lost his life after Derek Chauvin, a Minneapolis police officer, knelt on his neck for about 9 minutes. Russian Defense Ministry authorities announced that the port of the city of Mauripol restarted its activities. Major General Igor Konashenkov assured that the strategic port in the east of Ukraine is completely free of mines and is functioning as usual. During the operations, the Russian sappers found and neutralized more than 12,000 explosive devices and found weapons abandoned by the Ukrainian military. Russia denounced the intentions of the U.S. and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization to prolong the conflict in Ukraine. The spokeswoman of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Maria Zakharova, denounced that over 30 states, mainly NATO countries, fearing a defeat of the Ukrainian armed forces, provide military aid to Kiev for tens of billions of dollars. In this regard, the diplomat assured that the tendency to saturate Ukraine with weapons only feeds their revanchist feelings and does not contribute to the formation of a political and diplomatic atmosphere necessary for the de-escalation of the conflict. The BRIC countries established a joint commission on space cooperation, satellite observation and data exchange. The China National Space Administration highlighted Wednesday that the commission will guide the remote sensing sharing mechanisms to help improve the socio-economic development of the BRICS countries and meet common challenges such as climate change, disaster relief, and environmental protection. And we have more news coming up after our final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Senegal's President Macky Sall said on Wednesday that 11 newborn babies died in a fire at the neonatal section of a regional hospital in the town of Tibaoune, around 120 kilometers east of the capital Dakar. The tragedy occurred at Mame Abdou Aziz Dabak Hospital in the transport hub of Tibaoune and was caused by a short circuit, according to Senegalese politician Diop. I have just learned with pain and dismay about the death of 11 newborn babies in the fire at the neonatal department of the public hospital, Sall said in a tweet without giving further details about the fire. On Wednesday, May 25th, the African continent celebrates the African Day, whose theme this year is nutrition. The date marks the anniversary of the signing of the agreements creating the Organization of African Unity, now known as the African Union. The holiday represents the struggle for liberation, development, and economic progress of the peoples of Africa. This year, the celebration gathers under the theme of strengthening resilience in nutrition and food security on the African continent. hundreds of protesters from South Africa's economic freedom fighters marched to the French embassy in the country's capital city of Pretoria, calling on France to withdraw from Africa. The protesters, led by the party's commander-in-chief, Julius Malema, descended on the embassy to read out a memorandum on a mobile stage outside the premises. Malema called on France to grant the full independence to all African countries and demanded that they be allowed to determine their own currencies, monetary policies, and economic directions.
We, as a generation of freedom fighters, reject and condemn the fact that decades after the declaration of so-called independence of former colonized territories, colonizers continue to maintain a colonial and neo-colonial relationship with African countries which are supposed to be free from colonial control.
The Gambian government said it will prosecute former President Yahya Jammeh for murder, rape, torture, and other alleged crimes committed under his more than 20-year rule. The Ministry of Justice said it accepted all but 2 of the 265 recommendations made by a commission that probed alleged crimes committed by the state under Jammeh's rule from July 1994 to January 2017. Jammeh is living in exile in Equatorial Guinea, which has no extradition treaty with Gambia.
We note that certain individuals who had been adversely mentioned by the Commission continue to serve in various areas of public and security services. The government shall take steps for their immediate suspension from service while we work on a lawful means to effect their dismissal, termination, compulsory retirement as each case may require.
110 migrants were rescued on Tuesday night in the Mediterranean Sea of Tunisia's coast by a Spanish non-government organization. According to crew members, the organization was alerted of a possible vessel in distress late Tuesday and located the boat after 4 hours of navigation. The rescue migrants jumped in the water again when they saw a Tunisian Coast Guard approaching. The reaction triggered a second rescue operation, with all of the 110 rescued people being pulled out of the water. On Wednesday, Tunisian President Kais Saied issued a decree to call voters to a referendum on a new constitution on July 25th, the official gazette said, ignoring the opposition's calls to reverse the controversial move. Saied, who took executive power and dissolved parliament to rule by decree, has since said he will replace the democratic 2014 constitution with a new constitution via referendum and hold new parliamentary elections in December. Saied last week named law professor Sabok Belay to head an advisory committee that included law and political science deans to draft the new constitution for a new republic, excluding political parties from restructuring the political system. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, thousands of civilians were fleeing the ongoing fighting in the east of the country. The humanitarian situation has deteriorated in recent days, with continued clashes between the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and M23 rebels. The United Nations Humanitarian Coordination Office reported that over 10,000 people were displaced following the clashes, which began on Tuesday morning in the Kibumba area, around 20 kilometers from the city of Goma, the provincial capital of North Kivu.
That's why we're fleeing towards Goma. We can't stop here because we are worried.
Look how the people are living. We are suffering. There's no water and we've got nothing to eat because we just fled without bringing it from home.
In Switzerland, the World Health Assembly issued a resolution requesting greater attention and resources for the city's adequacy in terms of health emergencies. The more than 75 delegations signed the agreement with a view to improving clinical testing capabilities in all countries, an issue considered central to the strengthening of health systems. The agreement also seeks greater financing, planning and cooperation between regions, as well as a better overall understanding of the approach to the unique problems faced by their populations. We have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.